A Strange Goldfield by Guy Boothby. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nav Prusa. A Strange Goldfield by Guy Boothby. Of course, 9 out of every 10 intelligent persons will refuse to believe that there could be a grain of truth in the story I am now going to tell you. The 10th may have some small faith in my veracity, but what I think of his intelligence I'm going to keep to myself. In a certain portion of a certain Australian colony, 2 miners went out prospecting in what was then as now one of the dreariest parts of the island continent, chanced upon a rich find. They applied to government for the usual reward, and in less than a month 3,000 people were settled on the field. What privations they had to go through to get there, and the miseries they had to endure when they did reach their journey's end, have only a remote bearing on this story, but they would make a big book. I should explain that between Railcat and the field was a stretch of country some 300 miles in extent. It was badly watered, vilely grassed, and execrably timbered. What was even worse, a considerable portion of it was made up of red sand, and everybody who has been compelled to travel over that knows what it means. Yet these enthusiastic seekers after wealth pushed on, some on horseback, some in bullock wagons, but the majority travelled on foot, the graves and the skeleton of cattle belonging to those who had preceded them punctuating the route and telling them what they might expect as they advanced. That the field did not prove a success is now a matter of history. That same history, if you read between the lines, gives one some notion of what life must have been like while it lasted. The water supply was entirely insufficient. Provisions were bad and ruinously expensive. The men themselves, as a rule, were the roughest of the rough, while the less said about the majority of the women, the better. Then typhoid stepped in and stalked like the destroying angel through the camp. Its inhabitants went down like sheep in a draught, and for most part rose no more. Where there had been a lust of gold, there was now panic, terror. Every man feared that he might be the next to be attacked, and it was only the knowledge of those terrible 300 miles that separated them from civilization that kept many of them on the field. The most thickly populated part was now the cemetery. Drink was the only solace, and under its influence such scenes were enacted as I dare not describe. As they heard of fresh deaths, men shook their fists at heaven and cursed the day when they first saw pick or shovel. Some, bolder than the rest, cleared out just as they stood. A few eventually reached civilization, others perished in the desert. At last the field was declared abandoned, and the dead were left to take their last long sleep undisturbed by the clank of windlass or the blow of pick. It would take too long to tell all the different reasons that combined to draw me out into that most distressful country. Let it suffice that our party consisted of a young Englishman named Spicer, a wily old Australian bushman named Matthews, and myself. We were better off than the unfortunate miners, inasmuch as we were travelling with camels, and our outfit was as perfect as money and experience could make them. The man who travels in any other fashion in the country is neither more nor less than a madman. For a month past we have been having a fairly rough time of it, and were then on our way south when we had reason to believe rain had fallen, and in consequence grass was plentiful. It was towards evening when we came out of a gully in the ranges and had our first view of the deserted camp. We had no idea of its existence, and for this reason we pulled up our animals and stared at it in complete surprise. Then we pushed on again, wondering what on earth place we had chanced upon. "This is all right," said Spicer with a chuckle. "We're in luck. Grog shanties and stores, a bath, and perhaps girls." I shook my head. "I can't make it out. What's it doing out here?" Matthews was looking at it under his hand, and as I knew that he had been out in this direction on a previous occasion, I asked his opinion. "It beats me," he replied. "But if you ask me what I think, I should say it's Garunia, the field that was deserted some 4 or 5 years back." "Look here," cried Spicer, who was riding a bit on our left. "What are all these things? Graves, as I'm a living man. Here, let's get out of this. There are hundreds of them, and before I know where I am, old Polyphemus here will be on his nose." What he said was correct. The ground over which we were riding was literally bestrewn with graves, some of which had rough, tumble-down headboards, other being destitute of all adornment. We turned away and moved on over safer ground in the direction of the field itself. Such a pitiful sight I never want to see again. The tents and huts and numerous cases were still standing, while the claims gaped at us on every side like new-made graves. A bullock dray, weather-worn but still in excellent condition, stood in the main street outside a grog shanty whose signboard, strange incongruity, bore the name of the Killarney Hotel. Nothing would suit Spicer but that he must dismount and go in to explore. He was not long away, and when he returned it was with a face as white as a sheet of paper. "You never saw such a place," he almost whispered. "All I want to do is to get out of it. There's a skeleton on the floor in the back room with an empty rum bottle alongside it." He mounted, and when his beast was on its feet once more, we went on our way. None of us was sorry when we had left the last claim behind us. 50 miles from the field the country begins to rise again. There's also a curious cliff away to the left, and as it looked like being a likely place to find water,